Today, we're honored to have Susan Garcia Trieschmann join us to speak about her work with Curt's Café in Evanston. Susan has worked in food service since the age of 13. She was the director of catering at the legendary Pump Room before becoming an original owner and 25-year partner of Food for Thought Enterprises. She helped to build the company from a small catering company to a full-service food service industry specializing in upscale catering and cafe food service management. Susan is also an original member of Restorative Justice Evanston. RJE is a nonprofit organization in Evanston that works with youth and community on peaceful dialogue around harm caused, celebrations, and conflicts. Susan is an Evanston resident, has been married to Tom Trieschmann for 26 years, and has 2 children, Trevor and Anna, who are both graduates of ETHS. She is passionate about giving youth a second chance and helping them create a positive future for themselves and their families. So without further ado, Susan?
Thank you all very much, and I just realized I'm going to have to update my bio because I've been married now 31 years, ouch, and I was just telling a kind gentleman I moved to Wilmette a year ago, so God help me, I know. It's been a rough transition, but taxes were too high in Evanston. So we're going to start with a video about Curt's Café, which will answer maybe some of the fundamental stuff of what we do there, and then I was just going to share my story a little bit and hopefully empower some of you to take the walk as well.
If you've been where I've been and you know what I know, then you know I can't go back. Growing up in a house where domestic violence is a bold presence, where gangbanging it's a way of life. I battled with homelessness, addiction, the street life. I wasn't fulfilled, nor was I happy.
I never came up with a really good support system. Me and my mom had a rough relationship. So it was like, who do you go to?
This group of kids, when they come in, they've, in their own eyes anyways, failed at almost everything. So they failed at getting jobs, they failed at school, they failed at staying in the house that maybe they were raised in. This group of kids are often termed throwaway kids by social workers and people that have worked with them since they were in kindergarten, first, second, third grade.
Society puts an X on youth at a young age and, just pretty much knock them out the race of life. And, in here, they say there is no X. You come here, we help you, you help us. In the end, you're going to be prepared.
The mission of Curt's Café is to offer job skill and life skill training to highly, highly at-risk young men and young women and help them with those skills and then help them get a job and keep a job. At Curt's, we offer a lot of things. We teach them all the skills in the back of the house, in the kitchen. We teach them all the skills in the front of the house, on the line, making coffees and things. But we also, 50% of the time, we work on life skills. So we teach them the importance of getting to work on time. We teach them about anger management and how to navigate that difficult challenge. We teach them about domestic violence, what it looks like, and challenge them whether or not they're part of that. We teach them how to empower themselves.
Pretty good breakfast.
All the students who I've interacted with who come here, they come because they want a job. I mean, they want to work. They've heard about the program, so they all come really hungry.
And we don't turn anyone away, no matter what they've done. A lot of what we build is very, very small successes, and then they start to find hope in that. So we start to build hope and possibilities and inner strength and the strength to tell their story. So it's not as if their story is going to go away. It is always going to be there, but we have volunteers that help them navigate that story. So they don't find shame in it, they find pride in the fact that they lived through it. We have a team of professionals that stand by their word. They just know we're here for the long run with them.
I went through a lot while I was in my career at Curt, but I felt like I just had to give up. They won't let you give up. They're going to work with you. They're not going to just leave you out there to dry.
It's all about love, you know? Unconditional love. And love each one of these kids individually for who they are and what they bring.
This is my launching pad into the world. I gotta be dedicated, you know. I gotta have that initiative. I gotta have that drive. I gotta have that push that God give me.
Determination, perseverance, motivation. Just coming here, that's literally what they gave me. Supporting Curt is helping Curt support us kids.
I'm actually studying social work. I want to be a social worker. I want to be helping out my community. Where I'm from, we need places like this. And just seeing the dedication and the compassion and the love that the people here show, I want to take that and give it out where I'm from. I'm only 21. Who knows what's in store for me?
Cafes in Evanston, which is right around the corner from all you guys. And as the students told you, Craig and Amari, we do really good work there. If I was so bold, I would say we do great work there, but it's not those of us that started it or those of us that even work there. It's the young people that are finally given an opportunity and a space to change the direction of their lives and to change their decision making and help them navigate some of the more difficult things in their lives. So as we mentioned in the cafe, we work with teenagers. We only work with 15 to 24-year-old youth. And the reason for that is that there was some amazing programming out there for kids up to 14 and adults at 24 or 25. And so the target market that I decided was who I wanted to work with was just these teenage minds with these radical teenage brains and hormones and all the complications I raised to myself that come with dealing with teenagers. We're an open coffee shop so that people can come in and see these young people working really hard to change their lives. So we encourage people to come in and, you know, as Victoria may know, be patient through our service. You know, we're not the quickest cafe in town, but help these kids learn from the job skills that we're able to teach them. But also, equally as important, we want to teach the community, those of us that have turned a blind eye and left these children with nothing but a hopeless life. We want to teach all of us that these kids are worth it. These kids are amazing. These kids are beautiful. These kids want to change their own lives if we just give them the opportunity and if we stop looking at them in the way that many of us in our community look at young black and brown kids that are disadvantaged walking down the streets. About 80% of our students are homeless. And by homeless, I don't mean that they're couch surfing even. About 80% of our kids, once they're in the program and feel safe enough to move away from their lifestyle, they're sleeping in quarters of apartment buildings, they're sleeping on the street, they're riding trains all night. Apparently, this is something I just learned about 6 months ago, they sleep behind dumpsters because that's a safe space for them to sleep. I don't know anyone who would want their child sleeping behind a dumpster, but that's how our kids live when they start coming into our program, and these are Evanston and Chicago kids. 100% of our kids are food insecure. We have a huge issue in our communities with children who don't get enough to eat, and if they get enough to eat, they're not nourished properly. So our kids, again, once they move out of the lives that they've been living, will go without food from when they leave our cafe on Saturday afternoon until Monday when we open again. Typically, when they live on the street, they can do a deal and make enough money to buy some food, which is usually the dollar deal at McDonald's. But 100% of our kids have not grown up with, you know, my mom did, the cereal on the counter, 12 different choices, and the donuts and the scrambled eggs every Saturday, all that unnutritional stuff, but I did fine. But they've never seen that. I've gone into the places that they stay, and there is nothing like that going on in their kitchens. 60 to 70% of our kids have been in prison. And if they haven't been in prison, they've spent a long time, up to a year, in Cook County, 26 in California. And while they're in prison, most of our kids, when they go in, are 14 years old, and they come out about 17 or 18 years old. The things that I've learned through that process is that when they go in at 14, they stop thinking. We make them stop thinking. We tell them what to wear. We tell them what to eat. We tell them what they can and cannot read. We don't let them use computers. We don't let them have access to any technology at all. And usually the first thing that's pulled from them in prison is their schooling. So we set them up to stop thinking at 14, and then when they come out at 17 or 18 and they have full beards and they're kind of men, they still have the social emotional capacity of a 14-year-old. And as one of my kids taught me, they can't think past one. And they really can't think past one. They can't, if I tell them, honey, go get the cups, it takes them a really long time to go get the cups because they haven't had to think through even a process as simple as that. It's unbelievable to watch the first month when they come out, how we have to re-engineer and reprogram their minds. 60 to 70% of the young women that we serve are either victims of domestic violence or have seen too much domestic violence in their households. So many of the young girls that we serve are parents themselves at 15, 16, 17 years old, but they have lived in households where their mother, and this is stories I've been told, would roll over when they were being physically abused by their partner and say, honey, he's not hurting me, he loves me, and then roll back over because most of the children are staying in one room with the people that they live with. So they have learned that love looks like abuse. And unfortunately, when we watch them raise their young children, until we're able to intervene a little bit, that is how they're raising their children. And of course, the cycle just continues. So 60% of the young people that we serve have been victims way too many times or have seen victimization mostly throughout their lives. Most of our kids don't think they're smart enough to get through high school, which is why they drop out at 14 or 15. And they also don't have enough resources for them that don't make them look like they're dumb. Some of the classes that they're put into are amazing, but they're the dumb kids. And if you've ever been in the dumb kids class, you know what people think about you. So they drop out. It's easier, it's cooler, they don't have to show their vulnerability that way. And 100% of our students are victims of verbal abuse. So they've been told generationally by their parents or by the people in their lives that they're not worth anything and they're never going to count to anything. But more importantly, they've been told by our society in one way or another, all of which I've learned since I've opened the cafe. Would have been helpful had I read up. But that they're not ever going to make it. They're never going to be the people in the business suits that are making the money at the banks. They're never going to be in places of power. They're never going to be able to make social change in their society. So they might just as well get a little something something by selling on the street, so at least they can eat and have a place to stay. They have been taught this by our society for so many years that they don't even know that it's lessons that we are teaching them, and we continue to teach them. There are many, I'm sure everyone in this room, and many of the people that volunteer at the cafe and come to the cafe that believe differently, but so many of the things that I've seen myself do definitely continues to take power away from those that are in need. So when I was trying to prepare to come today, I was trying to think about, basically, I think I said to my husband, why do I get myself in these positions? What got me here? I don't like to speak in public. I don't like to speak about the kids. This is not my gig at all. And it made me think about this quote that I love, and I think we have it still at the wall at the cafe, and it's something that I really, truly believe. And I think it's what did get me to this place, speaking to amazing people today. The quote is, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. And back in the day, I used to do gun control advocacy. And I did that mainly because I wanted to teach our kids how to advocate for themselves and how to advocate for other people. So in 2000, I walked downtown, similar to what I was doing yesterday, and trying to, teach the kids. It was for Mother's Day, and I said, don't buy me any gifts. Take a walk with me. And I was trying to teach them how to use their voice in the most appropriate way. And then I joined a group, Million Mom March, and a group of brilliant women in Evanston. And one of the women, after about 4 meetings where we were going nowhere and the gun laws were getting worse and worse and worse, came up to me and said, someone's got to do something. And I was like, Judy, you're right. And I kind of turned around. I'm like, well, we're someone. We're not everyone, but we're someone. And our organization just started to blossom, and we started to do really good things for gun control. Obviously not enough, but really good things for gun control. We ended up using our organization to raise funds for our sister organizations, Southside Chicago, and we brought a ton of awareness. But that first time I verbalized that someone has to do something, and then you kind of do the Michael Jackson look in the mirror, and you're like, I'm not everything, but I'm something, made me kind of feel empowered to do something about gun control. And I think the same thing happened when I found out about so many injustices with these young people. I really had, I said the other day, I had to come to Susan meeting, and I'm like, man, somebody's got to do something. And again, it was a look in the mirror, and I'm not everybody, but I am somebody. And my journey kind of took a different path than most. I did advocate for gun control, but that was to teach my kids. It had nothing to do with me. And, back in the day, I did protest, but I was always in a group of people. As Glenda had said, I started an organization called Food for Thought when I was 25 years old with my sister, Nance, and my brother-in-law, Curt. And we started Food for Thought with $300 and this dream that we were going to make a business that all of our family members could work in and that we were going to make money enough to provide for our families. And none of us, I think between the three of us, had a college degree. I think we had been in college collectively, we figured, at one point for 1 year. And my claim to fame was Aikido. So I wasn't going to go far with martial art that taught you how to run like hell in another direction. Curt was piano. So we didn't do very well in college, but we decided that we could open this company with $300 and a minivan and be the best caterer in Chicago. 25 years later, we were, in fact, one of the top 3 caterers in Chicago, built on the backs of Nance, Curt, and I and our families, but we never gave up. We believed in ourselves. We have a really strong family that supported us emotionally. We learned to live on nothing, and we built our company up to a $25 million company in 25 years, which I sold to my sister, I think 10 years ago, when Curt died from lung cancer. And having been in a business for 25 years with 2 people that I love so much, when Curt was going through his last year of life, I kind of walked with him and learned what was important in that last stage. And it had nothing to do with the wealth that we were accumulating. It had nothing to do with the vacations we had been on. It had nothing to do with the stuff. It had everything to do with the man that he had become. And it had everything to do with the people that he had surrounded himself with. And I started kind of learning from that process of what is important to me at this stage. I had amassed a little bit of money. I think I had a savings account at that point. We had a home, high mortgage, but we had a home in Evanston. And I had stuff. I had enough stuff. My kids were doing well. But walking with someone like that really makes you wonder, what would you do if you were 53 and at the end of the runway? What would be important to you? And one of the low reaches for me was college. I'd never really thought I could do it. I was the kid who always got D's and E's in college, or in high school. I barely made it through high school. And I didn't think that I could do it, but I had a 16-year-old son who said to me once, well, Mom, you didn't go to college, so I don't think I'm going to go to college, and you've done pretty well. And I'm like, that's not happening twice in this family. I'm going to go to college. So I went to Oakton Community College and did 2 years and got my associate's degree and just loved the idea that I was a smart person, a book smart person. I started reading books for the first time in 40 years because my English teachers actually had told me that I was too stupid to interpret a book. So I simply stopped reading. After Oakton, are you an English teacher? After that, I went to DePaul, which is where Victoria teaches. And I went to DePaul because it was easy. They had a class for old people. I was 50 years old at the time, and I thought I could get through it in a year. And when I was there, as smart as I was, I signed up for a class that I thought I was signing up for real estate, and I signed up for a class in restorative justice. And I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to get out of the class, and calling the service provider person was a pain in the butt. So I just said, I'll do it. Read the syllabus, looks like an easy A, I can do this, and I show up for my first class. And I went through 11 weeks of saying restorative justice is stupid, Listening with your heart and speaking from your soul is ridiculous. If you think you can do this with teenagers, you're wasting your time and energy and my $3,300, I think, that costs for a class there. I had everything negative to say about this program in restorative justice, which was teaching the philosophy of learning to listen from your heart. And for my final exam, because I was a truly big hater of the process, they sent me to the prison where we cage our children, and I had to sit in a restorative circle with 18 youth that were being sent to adult prison at 17 years old. And I sat for about an hour and a half where we drummed and dialogued about what kind of day you're having, and what's your biggest fear, and what do you hope to do when you grow up. And learning from the young people that were in that circle about dreams and possibilities that even I couldn't have dreamt for them was an amazing experience for me. It was a process in listening that I really hadn't qualified as something that we needed in our community, and certainly something that I needed in myself. Because I'm a very shy person, I'd always been a pretty good listener. But listening from your heart is completely different than listening. And I guess I had learned more than I thought in my 11 weeks, and I started to listen to these young people in prison. And every single young person was saying the same thing. They were going to get out and they were going to get a job. They were going to be released in the next 5 years and they were going to get a job. And every single kid that I looked at, I thought to myself, even though I still have food for thought and I had 300 employees, there is no way I'd hire this kid. He has no social skills. He has no professional skills. He has no education at all. He doesn't know what's up with technology. There's no way I would hire him, even though I'm a nice, ethical, humanistic type person. I just couldn't do it to my business. Business was business. Home was home, right? How many of us walk that delicate walk? So I started an organization in Evanston with 2 other amazing women who said, let's do this in Evanston. Let's sit victims and offenders, youth offenders and victims down in circle. Let's have them talk about the harm that they cause. Let's talk about how we can repair that harm. Let's talk about what forgiveness looks like in our community of Evanston. And I think that that's a word that really resonated with me, is forgiveness. We can only move forward, in my opinion, internally if we learn to forgive ourselves and forgive others. And I think as a community, we can only move forward if we learn to truly forgive. So in our victim offender circles, which we did in communities, but we also started a program in the police department, I kept sitting with young men primarily, but also young women who continued to say the same thing. I'm going to get a job. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get a job. I'm not going to need to steal her purse because I'm going to get a job. And I, again, went back with my work hat and said, no, you're not. It's not going to happen. Who would hire you? If I wouldn't hire you, nobody's going to hire you. So I kept asking them, how do you think you're going to get a job? What's it going to look like? And things like that. And I went to every single organization that I could think of to ask them to help these kids get a job. So it was one of those things that I was kind of watching my words, right? I was listening and watching my words and saying, somebody's got to do something. And I was pointing to every somebody in Evanston and in Chicago that should have done something. I went to the Youth Job Center, but they couldn't work with those kids. I went to social service providers, but they said that those kids were never going to change. Again, like on the video, they're throwaway kids. We wait until they're 25 and their brains have matured. I went to YOU so they could get them early. And all these organizations do great, but it's those kids that they don't want to work with, because those of us in nonprofit know if you get 100 kids in and only 10 do well, you're never going to get funding for the next year. So even as a nonprofit, you have to kind of watch your steps a little bit so that you get funding for the 10 that you can help or the 100 that you can help. I went to the Inspiration Corporation that does amazing work in Chicago with adults and said, why don't we just mimic your program here in Evanston? I'm a restaurant person. I can help you with all that kind of setup and get everything going. Come on in. I'll even help fund it. And they said the same thing. They're teenagers. We don't work with teenagers. Those teenagers aren't worth it. There's no way those teenagers will change. And I think I said one more time is someone's got to do something. And I listened to my words and said, okay, give it a shot. Like, what can you lose? Had I thought maybe a little further, I probably would have thought I could have lost a lot of money, and I could have once more proven that these kids were not worth changing. I could have done some real damage, but I really went with my heart, and I really went with my faith in what my heart was telling me was the right thing to do was give these kids one more chance. But not just a chance. Give them what they were asking for. So my son at the time was 24, and he helped me write a business plan. So I wrote it like I did at Food for Thought because we had 25 restaurants, so we wrote a bunch of different business plans. Then Trev put in this teenage look to it and feel to it and what kids would really gravitate to. It was a great business plan. And then I went to the young people that I chose to serve. So there was a group of 4 kids that were coming out of prison. They were all in the age group. And I sat down, bought them pizza, and said, so this is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to build a program for you. I'm going to build a cafe. You're going to work at it for free, and I'm going to teach you all the skills that I know, and we're going to feed you, and we're going to love you, and we're going to teach you some life skills, too. We're going to teach you how to deal with your anger, and we're going to teach you this, and we're going to teach you that. And they said, that's great. You're one more white woman who thinks you're going to save us, and we're not going to come. And at that point, I was in pretty deep. I think I had already secured a lease, and I'm like, well, what do you want? This is what you told me. You want a job. I'm going to give you job training. And they said, we want to get paid, and we want a job. We don't want you to save us. We want to feel like we have value when we come in there. So you need for us to work. You can't do this on your own if we don't show up. We need to know that we're running the place, not you. Again, white people. We need to know that you respect us for the work that we're going to bring here. So I licked my wounds a bit and, moved my pride aside, and I said, I'll do what you want me to do for 3 months. If it bombs, I'm out, and I'm closing the program. If it works well, we'll move it ahead, and we'll see what goes on. And most people who have ever thought about opening a restaurant don't do it. It's very expensive. I took a $100,000 mortgage off my house and did that. So walking away from that wasn't going to be an easy thing, but I was true to my word to these young people. And I was true to my word to myself. I was doing this for them. If I was doing it for them, I needed to do what they asked for, not what I thought they needed. And I did the exact program that they identified would help them. And through that process, we were able to help 80% of our kids that have been through our program find jobs and keep jobs. That's a huge statistic. I think Inspiration Corporation has a 40% job placement and retention rate. It's not that we're perfect. I want 100%, but I'll take 80%. We have moved every single one of our young women out of domestic violence situations and put them either into shelter or into safer housing. Once they get a job, we sign them up for subsidized housing, which takes about 6 to 8 months in our communities. But we sign them up and we make sure that we don't let go of them until they're in safe housing. And then once they're in the safe housing, we get all the furniture they need for them. And once we, God bless you, once we get the furniture for them, we make sure they can get back and forth to work. So we don't let go of them until we know that they're secure. We have kept our kids out of prison. The recidivism rate in Illinois for young adults is 86%. It states that 86% of the kids that go into prison as teenagers within 3 years of release will go back into prison and into an adult prison for 7 to 10 or life. We have shown that if we do what they're asking us to do with love and compassion and truth is they can succeed. Our recidivism rate is 3%. We've only let 3 kids go back into prison after being released. All of them had graduated our program and then really done knucklehead things. But all 3 of them, when they came out, within a day, came back to Curt's, said they messed up, asked for forgiveness, and then we've been able to get 2 of them jobs, and 1 of them I'm still working on, but he's my challenge this week. But all 3 served a quick sentence. They weren't going in, as all of us know, when we make mistakes, we tend to make bigger mistakes. So if our kids went in for domestic violence the first time, they went in for a felony because they were hurting someone with a gun, or their charges always got higher. Our kids I think all 3 of them went in for dealing drugs, and it was a blip in their thinking. But they came out, they apologized, and we worked through them, and we will get the 3rd one a job. We have made sure that our students who graduate, if they're interested in going back to school, are in school. So Amari, who was on the film, had no intention whatsoever of going to school. That was not her thing. She has a 2-year-old son. She's a victim of abuse. She was living in very unstable housing. But this was her dream. We got her set up. We helped with tuition. I walked her into school the first day, and we had breakfast together, and she was able to get through her first semester. We just walked another kid into Oakton who has been there now, I think, well, she'll graduate her first year, and she was another one that had dropped out of high school. We help our kids get their GED. If they're in the program, they have to be in our GED tutored program so that they can start seeing the value of education. Although I wasn't a good student and school wasn't my gig, in this day and age, we know that kids need to stay in school. It also helps them mature a little faster in a safe space, so we try to get them all back in school. We have kept our kids from selling drugs in our community and also from being violent in our communities. So communities that they have come from have called us and said, the young man is no longer gangbanging on the corner. The young man is no longer hanging out with these kids that we knew that he was hanging out with. The young woman is no longer prostituting herself on our corner. So we know that the communities are also being served. So it's a win-win situation for our students and for our communities. And although I didn't go into it wanting to help communities, it just wasn't on my radar at the time, it has made a huge impact on the communities that we live in. So one of the ways that we have found success in our program is our job skills are great. You can teach how to slice, dice, who doesn't like to learn how to cook, and all that kind of good stuff. We have taught life skills like anger management. That was actually their request, not something I thought was as important or as needed. We teach safe sex, we teach table etiquette, we teach financial literacy, all those kind of things I called minivan classes that I taught my kids when I was schlepping them back and forth to soccer or basketball or Irish dance classes. But we also have a full-time social worker at both cafes. And the reason for that is I'm not a social worker, I'm a restaurant girl. I love my restaurant girl hat, I'm comfortable in it. I do not have the capacity to hold the stories that come into our cafes from our kids. They have really been beat down. And for the first year, I tried to wear both hats, and it was very destructive for me trying to lead a team and get up every day saying, it's okay that we've treated them this way, let's just help them have a better life. I still haven't been able to get past the way we do treat the kids. So we put a social worker full-time at both cafes that helps them with the social emotional stuff that they've been through, that walks that walk with them, and that helps them with the state IDs and all those other things that are very unobtainable to these young people. We make sure that when they're in the cafe, they're safe. So the cafes are outside of gang-affiliated areas so that the kids can come in there and be the kids that they were when they were younger. So they're not the beat-up young kids that you see on the street that still walks outside with their pants dragging. We let them be safe and be the young men and women that they were when they were born, where they didn't have prejudice, when they didn't have hate, when they didn't have disappointment, when they weren't living in hopelessness. And it's amazing, like every single customer has said to me, you know, that first couple weeks, that guy never picked his head up, and now he knows my name and he knows my order, and da-da-da. Yes, the shame is released. You know, the pressure is released. All that kind of stuff is released. So they do have the strength to hold their head up and look, those of us that look rather white, in the eye. I looked up ethically in the dictionary because I didn't want to mess this up. And it said morally, justly, decently, and honorably. And those are such beautiful words that I am going to steal, I'm just saying. To talk about how we treat the kids when they come in. We're run by volunteers. We have very small staff due to funding, but we treat our kids, every single one of them, in that way, and we treat our community in that way so that they learn how to do that. But justly, decently, honorably, why we can't treat everyone like that, I don't know, but we make sure that our kids taste it for the first time, and they start to kind of taste the sweetness of being treated the way that we all hope everyone would treat one another. Human is another thing that I found really interesting, in that when I spoke last week, someone asked me how I came up with what these young people needed besides what they told me. And unfortunately, I wasn't seeing it in our society. I wasn't seeing us treat one another as humans in many instances. So I actually went to the gangs and saw what they did, because they were doing it better than we were doing it. They were getting all the kids. And I looked at what they were giving the kids, and they were giving them what looked to our students like love, but that was really a community. They were always welcome. They were giving them job skills. They were giving them places to stay. They were giving them a way to earn money. They were giving them all these things that our community have stripped from them. They were treating them like humans. And so when I started developing concept, it was by what the gangs were doing, and it was by treating them like human beings, like I would expect to be treated, like y'all would expect to be treated. So to finish, because I'm on the yellow thing and the thing, I just want to, kind of express what I would ask of y'all when you leave, and what I try to remember every day. And I'm so far from perfect in what I'm doing, but I try to look at everyone as independent people now and as unique, humans, rather than bulking them all together. So what I've learned that, and what I would ask if you could do, is when you see a young man dragging his pants and someone makes a comment, or your head goes to the comment, think about the fact that when I ask them why they drag their pants, although yes, it is culturally what they do, I was a hippie, so we wore long pants, is many of them don't have belts. Simple, but they don't have belts. We get them belts, but when you live on the street, it's kind of hard to get everything together. So oftentimes, 90% of the time, they're dragging their pants because it looks good, but they also don't have a belt. Young women, I always used to judge when they'd wear the tight stretch pant things that you can buy at Walgreens for $1.99 that don't fit anyone well. Think about maybe that they're wearing those pants because they only have $1.99, right? If we go to wash our clothes, next time we put our clothes in the washing machine at our homes, think about a kid who has to pay $2 for a washing machine and $1.50 for a dryer. And if everything that you own is in your backpack, you're not going to go there all that often. You probably only have one pair of pants, and that's a lot of money. It's should I eat or should I wash my clothes? There's nowhere for young people to wash their clothes for free. So a lot of our young girls will wear these inappropriate pants because in our society, I hear it's changing, but we'll see. But even the fact that it has been this way for years. In Illinois, we decided that it was a luxury for young women to have their periods. And so that in order for the young women to buy a box of Tampax, they couldn't use their link card or their food stamp card. They would have to steal that product in order to have appropriate hygiene for themselves. So when they were throwing the pants away and buying another pair for $1.99, it was because they had worn them for a couple months. And you know what? Those of us that are women know that you can't quite do that and be safe. But our society decided that Rogaine is not a luxury. They pay for Rogaine, they pay for Viagra, but they will not pay for Tampax for women. Think about maybe the next time you see a young man with a backpack that's his home. I always used to tell my kids, don't hang around that guy. I think he's selling drugs out of his backpack. I had since learned that he was homeless, and that was all the clothes that he had. And think about when young people say they can't keep a job. This is a very quick story about my friend Everell, who was working for 9 months, and he got a raise, and then he got promoted to a building downtown, actually with Food for Thought, and he was a shift manager downtown. And in the middle of shift at lunchtime, he was pulled aside by 2 police officers who drew their guns and went after him. And by the time that they pulled him aside to ask him questions, it had already gone to building management. Management had called my sister. There was a whole conversation about why would you bring those kids into this place and put all of our people in danger? We're going to drop your contract, blah, 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 blah. So Nance had to get Everell to another place or fire him. If it was me before this, he would have been fired. So when they pulled Everell aside after they had made him lose his job and his respect and his dignity in this place that he loved working, they only wanted to ask him if he had witnessed a murder 2 years earlier, because someone had told him that he did. And if they had just checked the records, they would have seen that he was in prison at the time. And there's no way that he could have witnessed this murder. So these kids, as hard as they try, our society keeps pushing them back. So when we judge, and when I judge, why don't you just keep the job, dude? This is ridiculous. This is your 3rd job. And then I hear stories like this. Maybe just we could turn our thinking a little bit. And there's this great quote that someone said, rather than saying, what'd you do? Ask what happened to you. Because that's now what I start working on, is what happened to you? How did you get back here? Let's move you forward. And then the last thing is, I would say, thinking back to my quote, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. I would say to all of you that if you've been saying it for a long time, start listening to yourself, listen with your heart. If I can do this, anyone can do what they believe needs to be done. I am the shyest person in this room. I guarantee you of that. I am I lead from behind. I'm not the one out front. I also never thought I could run an entire business by myself, and I don't like nonprofit work and asking for money. But I do this every day. We're in business now for 5.5 years. So if I can do this, you can do this. If you have a dream, listen to your words and put it into action. And if you ever need help, call me. I left some brochures on the back tables, and these bookmarks have free coffee on them. So if you ever want to come to the cafes for free coffee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you today. And thank you for doing the work that you do in this organization. Peace.
Hi, Susan. Just love your organization. I work for a company who's been using you for catering for years, HMH in Evanston. And I was really excited when you opened Curt's Café South. And I'm just wondering if hopefully in the future you can expand even more and open more places, maybe in the city of Chicago, possibly.
Thank you. I suppose I should have put that in my speech. That's a great question. So North opened on Central and Lincolnwood, and I mixed boys and girls there. South opened on Dempster and Dodge because I was tired of mixing boys and girls in one program when they were teenagers and the boys were coming out of prison. So I moved the girls into the new location, which was safer for them and safer for me because I'd raised 2 teenagers. That was enough. But the program is designed so that in their classes, the boys learn, keep your hands off, respect women, build your own self up as a man. The girls are taught female empowerment, body imaging, say no, how you can say no, why you can say no. So our programs are very different for the boys and the girls. Our next project will most likely be in Highland Park because we have a group of amazing people from open communities actually trying to raise money to open a cafe in Highland Park, and we'll be bringing kids from Waukegan and North Chicago in. I think North Chicago has a 42% graduation rate, which is pathetic. So we're going to start working with those kids, and then my next dream would be opening in Obama's library. I think it would be an awesome placement for Curt's Café. So I don't know anybody except nonprofit people, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to make connections and stuff. So the idea is to expand.
Thank you so much. It was a phenomenal talk.
Thank you.
And your comments on if not us, then who is going to solve the problems that we are all thinking and complaining about is incredibly resonant. I wanted to ask you about the process of actually starting this kind of organization, because you mentioned you had a financial success due to your existing business, and you had a lot more financial security than even most well-meaning white people who want to go in and would be met with the same kind of resistance as someone who's just coming in to try to save. So I was wondering if you could comment on how your financial privilege in that way played a role in you being able to do this sort of thing, and how that should be, how you think that should play out in other people that are trying to follow your footsteps.
I think, and that's a question that no one asks, and they really should, because I did have financial privilege. I had made money at Food for Thought, and when I sold it for a good enough amount of money, but I was determined to pay for my college and our kids' college, so that kind of money went out the door because they both picked expensive colleges, God bless them. But I think the best way to start is to start by partnering with an organization. So I hear a lot of people wanting to do things similar to Curt's Café, and they would just partner with someone. One, you wouldn't be as disrespectful to donor dollars. I think donor dollars are so important to be respectful to. I took out a $100,000 loan for my house, but then I couldn't afford my house any longer, so my husband and I had to move to a condo, which is in Wilmette, and it's lovely. But we did have to make life changes because we chose to take on that debt and then couldn't continue to pay for it because I didn't get paid for 3.5 years. So, you have to be willing to live with the sacrifice. I did the same thing when I opened Food for Thought, so it wasn't new to me. But I think the better place is partner with someone, understand the needs. I mean, I had no idea these kids were homeless. I had no idea they didn't eat at all, ever, and that I was going to feed them 3 times a day. So really dig in and learn what you want to do, and then get another nonprofit to help your branch to do what you want to do with them. So I think that's a safer space to start, and then, too, I think we'd be more respectful of donor dollars that way.
Yes, could you tell us something about the artwork in Curt's Café and about the artists who contributed?
Sure. So we do rotating art in both cafes, and we try to find art that's either appropriate to what the students need to learn. So sometimes, I think recently at North, we had artwork from people who were in prison, beautiful artwork telling great stories. That's kind of like the community can learn. But we also like artists who live in our community, work in our community, and just want to put up their pretty pictures of birds. And the reason being is we want them to talk to our kids about, you know, I didn't ever think I could be a photographer, but look at what I did, and now they're framed, and they're beautiful, and people like them. So the rotating art, there's no guidelines around it. We have people who vet it or whatever art people do at both cafes for free. We have volunteers do that. And it's just so that it's not rude and inappropriate. So anyone who wants to hang their art can do that. I think it's a 1-month rotation. But it's really to teach our kids possibilities.
Have you had problems with people you hired who showed up late or didn't show up for work, and what did you do about it?
So most of our, the young people that are in our program are called students, and they're in our program for 3-ish months. And, you know, if they're not ready to go in 4, I've kept one for a year. It's just when they're ready to go, we let them go. And because they're teenagers, if they're with us too long, they get really bossy. They're always telling me what to do. And they think like every place you walk into, people hug you, and oh my gosh, you're only 10 minutes late today. Oh, party. But so we only keep them for about 3 months. And the first month, no one shows up on time, and no one shows up on schedule, almost ever. It is not a life skill that they have been taught. It is not something that they have been shown. So it is really a difficult thing for us to teach them why it's important to show up for a job. And as I've had to tell many students, the schedule is not a pick and choose, like you got to come every day, your name's on there. But we teach it. That's what we teach. The way we teach that it's wrong is that if they're doing it consistently, they get points taken off, which means they get less of a stipend at the end of the day. That always kind of the pocketbook talks. But more importantly, we sit them down with the team that they're working with. We're not real cohorty, but cohortish. And the team says, you know, man, I can't open the back and open the front. And every time you're late, you put me in a really bad situation, and I look really dumb in front of customers. Or they put them in a circle with the managers, and the managers say, you know, I'm 60 years old, man. I can't be making the coffee and putting all the chairs up and da-da-da. This really hurts me. And then when I go home, I yell at my husband all night, and that really hurts him. And then I'm screaming at my kids, and they're not really happy with me. If you could just show up on time, this ripple effect wouldn't happen. So we teach them like the harm that's caused from it. We don't reprimand or judge by the decision they made, because it is a new skill set for them.
Thank you very much. I just want to know what I can do, me. Can you use an English teacher?
Oh, yeah, have you heard our kids talk? Yeah, for sure. You know, we can definitely, we run by volunteers, so all of our classes are run by volunteers. Both cafes have a class at either 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock or something, I don't know when they're taught, but a full hour to an hour and a half of a volunteer teacher coming in to teach English skills. Writing, we teach English through writing, so we have book clubs at both places as well, but we don't ask the kids to read out loud usually. So there's always ways that people can help. And if you can't help by volunteering, then help by telling the story. But English is something that we really need to work on. Yeah.
Thank you for a good talk. I appreciate it. I'm just curious, in your experience, are the parental rights of most of the parents in these cases terminated, or are the parents involved? Or, I mean, I guess the right-wing question to some of this would be like, where are the parents? And I'm assuming that maybe in many cases they're just so overwhelmed with their own problems that that's part of the reason why the kids, you know, aren't taught certain things and aren't brought up the way maybe other people are. I'm just curious, do you have contact with the parents? Do they ever show up or have comments or want input? Or have they had their rights terminated?
Oh, I don't think they've had their rights terminated because the kids don't go play at that level. It's different parenting. Most of our fathers I've never met. I think I've met 2 fathers in 5.5 years, and one's a really good guy. The mothers, I've met 3, I think, in this amount of time. But most of our women have been treated the way that they teach their children that treatment is okay. They really don't know how to ask for respect, and they haven't been taught that they deserve respect as well. They also rely on men often because if they have children, they want to put their kids undercover. So that's what our girls have been taught. Even if they're being raped continuously in the home, if their kid has a bed, that's all good. That's how we roll. So I haven't met many parents. One of our parents is coming out of prison February 28th, and she's been in there since 2003, I think, a mother. So that's even a more complicated situation, is how do we get our young student and her back in a space of respect and understanding. Every single story is different, but the families are very dysfunctional. I believe we can stop that. Like our kids who are having kids, we're trying to teach them a different way to parent. And one of the complicated things is a lot of the places that teach parenting teach white parenting. And I was taught by my mother, who's Irish Catholic, and I parent one way. That's the only way I know how, right? I don't think that African American families parent bad. It's the parents of our kids who are bad parents. So we have to make sure that we're parenting to culture. And I don't think we know how to do that yet as a culture, because all the programs that I've looked at are very white parenting teaching. I don't know how to say that without being mean, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Can you tell us how you got access to gang culture, how you were able to observe?
I was working, like just doing peace circles in the prison through Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation in Chicago that worked with the DePaul teacher that I had the benefit of working with. So that was one entry in. My son had a lot of friends who were active in the prison system through Evanston High School. He was on the basketball team. It was just a group that he hung around with. But now we get all of our students through social workers, through the courts directly, through probation and parole officers. And because, of course, we're incarcerating more black and brown kids, it's very easy to get into that role or that group of people. And for whatever reason, I think because I just don't have a really big judging gene in me, is the students trust me. And when I ask them about their gang affiliation and their relationship and what they learn and why they go, they tell me. And a lot of it I don't want to hear. A lot of what I've heard I don't want to hear, but they trust me enough to tell their story. And I am fortunate enough to be able to listen and learn.
Yeah, this may be a bit of an extension on that, but for all the good that a program like this can do, it can only serve a finite number of people. And I'm sure the need is much, much greater than what even the organization can do. So how do you choose? What's the vetting process? How do your clients come to you, and how are the decisions made to who you can serve?
There are way too many kids that need our services. That's a really good point. And we vet by seeing how many boxes are checked. So we really only choose to work with kids who are homeless and gang affiliated and prison time and abused. And like the more things that we've done to them, the more likely they're to get into our program. So we do have a lot of kids in Evanston particularly who have had a run-in with the police and maybe spend some time in county, but they have at least a place to lay their head, and we know that parenting isn't terrible there, or they're selling weed on the corner, but maybe that's just so that they can get a group around them, but they're not carrying guns and they're not homeless, they're not sleeping on the street. So I guess the low reach kids we generally don't work with. We really just choose, but I don't usually put in literature because people get nervous, is the most at need, the most vulnerable, the worst crimes. We work with anyone except sex offenders, but those kind of crimes are who we choose to take. And then if there's a gap, which there really almost never is, then we'll take a low-hanging fruit, and then they can get through the program faster and hopefully maybe change culture. But we choose to work with the most at need kids.
Do you suggest anything we could do at the, say, the grammar school level, where this pretty much begins, or at home? Is there anything you could do at that level, start grabbing these kids early before they get to be 16, 17? It's almost too late by that time.
It is almost too late. I agree with that. I think for those younger people, somehow in Evanston, well, we have like 100 and something churches or something. I think that if we mentored one-on-one students that we know are highly at risk, students who have identified as having a family that's involved in gangs, or they're just falling through the cracks for whatever reason. We have social service agencies that are great in the schools, but when I used to sit in a group with these social service providers in the primary schools, even in the high school, they all sit down, they flip open their computer, the kid talks, they type, they don't listen, and everybody's got their computer, everyone's typing, and one kid finally said, "Do you realize you just sent me to 8 different therapies? There's only 7 days in a week and I don't even have a bus card." So we're not listening to each other, right? You know, so I think the social workers, when they get them, or the teachers, if they're allowed to speak their voice and say, "Victoria really needs some support here." If we could even, like, maybe we can't afford to have a whole program of teachers and social workers, but maybe all the churches could step up and identify 3 people that would walk with this kid from 6th grade until high school. I think it would be hugely beneficial. They don't feel part of our community. They don't feel part of our groups. And I think there's a way we can make that happen. I might be naive in that. I don't know. It's not my reach. But I think we turn a blind eye. It sure as heck is easier to do that, right? They need mentors. Yes, ma'am? Oh, my bad. Sorry, I'm so nervous. I'm trying and here's my money for donation. I don't want to forget that.
I'm an Evanston resident, and there is, there are scattered groups of people around town that are stepping up to the plate. FAM has been doing it for many years, and all I know about them is they have good pancakes on once a year at Fleetwood when my husband and I go to that. I had 2 comments. One is that you do, the kids do get a food sanitation certificate too, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that I want to pass the baton to the lady who wanted to know what could she personally do.
Victoria?
I met you, I know you don't remember me, but I met you at a garage sale many years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And you said that...
Mine.
You said that the young men could use ties when they, go for job interviews. So ever since that, I've been going to state sales, and I just kind of put them aside, and I didn't know when I would run into you again. I did.
Awesome. Thank you.
But the reason I'm passing the baton to the other lady is now that I'm done with the ties, you said they could use belts, so it's up to her to start collecting belts. So anyway, at the end of the program, I'll just give you the ties.
Thank you. And that FAN connection is a really good connection. Our board president has been the board president of FAN, and he is still super active there, and he knows that they could do maybe a little bit better there in walking continuously with the kids. It's great that they work with them until 8th grade or something like that, but they know the kids who need services. And Rick has said many times, I worked with him. I'm like, well, dude, stop the cycle, man. Like, get something going. Yes.
And then there's more kids to be helped. So next year, instead of continuing through, they're probably trying to help the new group.
Yeah. They're an awesome group.
Do you still have the Mexican Cafe on Central?
No, we stopped doing the Mexican at night. I tried to do the cafe during the day, and then we did a Mexican cuisine at night for our graduate students to work. And we just couldn't get customers. Thank you.
Just that tie story I'm going to be telling for years to come afterwards. That's the best story I've heard. All right.
I was wondering if you had any gang repercussions. I had a Latin king in my class, and he broke away from the Latin kings, and they resented that. And he was beaten up in our alley, by our school. So I was just wondering if you had any resentment from various gang groups.
We definitely do, and it's getting a little bit more complicated. So back in the day, it used to be when you were in a gang, you would get beat in, so you would physically get beat up until almost you were dead, and then you'd be in the group. And then if you chose to get out of the group respectfully, you could choose to get out, and you would be beat out. So almost again to the point of death, but then you'd be out. And even 5 years ago when we opened, I had kids come in beat out, and then we'd understand that they were out, and the gangs would know they're out, and everything was groovy. But it no longer is like that. When you're in, you're in. So I have like 3 kids running right now that are all affiliated. I think one's become the leader. He's like 12 too. I don't know how that happened, but and I can't get them out. Like they keep saying I can't get out, and I don't want to put Curt's in a vulnerable situation, which is very respectful. But we've had many kids representative at Curt's and have yet to have an incident. But they do have to periodically go back. I mean, it's the lifestyle. I mean, I think that if someone had more skill sets than I do and were able, like the young woman said, to really sit with the gangs and have conversations with the gangs and help them know that there is another way, I think that we'd be able to turn it a little bit, or even like encourage them to go back to bad behavior from back in the day so you had an out. When our student was killed, Benjamin Bradford, 2 years ago last week, at his candle vigil, 3 kids came up to me and said, I want to be in your program. Bae said I need to be in your program, but I don't know how to get out of the gang. So I just met with people I knew or needed to know and said, can we give them a chance? And one guy just said to me the other day, most people know that if you're at Curt's, you're good. Everything's good. Like, what did he say? Oh, he said to me, I told him, Susan, whatever you do, if you beat up the old lady there, the white one with glasses, I'm coming after you. I'm like, okay, so many things wrong with that sentence, Raheem. Let's break this down. Starting with the old lady part. So, dialogue, trustful, make them safe. They will speak. The one that I saw in Chicago that didn't work very well, gang and cops were speaking. The cops were standing up here and the gangs were sitting there. There's no inclusiveness there. There's definitely positional power. And I think we need to sit with these young people who are in gangs or older leaders in a circle, in a respectful circle. So there's no power at all. There's just conversation. And I think it would make a big shift. I don't know that I'm the one to do it, but somebody here might be.
I'll get to you. Believe me, I saw your hand. I will get to you in a second. I just saw Rennie here first, and then I'm going to give the mic to you, okay?
I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
There are other groups around in one way or another working with very troubled kids. For instance, Rice Child and Family Center, and I think my cousin Mead Paladowski working with kids in prison or detention. I'm wondering, is there any forum or consortium of people working with these really troubled kids where you can all get together and share your learnings, your ideas, your sources, and so on and so forth?
I think best practices that should be done. Even when we started Food for Thought, we got together all the caterers so we could all talk, even though we're competitors. I would think that's a good idea. Evanston just started by 2 executive directors, started an executive director group of about 30 people to have conversations about challenges with leading nonprofits. I do a lot of networking with people doing that work, but it's called like networking in bars. And so we have a beer together and we talk about usually a kid. Moran Center in Evanston does amazing work. I have everybody on speed dial. So we do it more casually. We don't do anything formally. I think what I've found in nonprofit work, as busy as everyone is, I've never been as taxed as far as time goes and resources and energy. I don't know that if I said, let's all get together, hold hands, and make bigger, badder changes, that anyone would even be able to show up to the table. We're all pretty busy right now, but I think it should be done. I think we'd all benefit from it. But I do network a lot with the Moran Center, Youth Job Center, people that are working with the same demographic. I always want to make sure I'm not duplicating services. So before I do anything, it's like, who else could be doing it? Them I talk to. So if someone's doing it, I just send the class to them or whatever.
Sorry, I didn't see it earlier.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what your program looks like physically. Do the kids get together at the cafe and you have the programs there? And do most of the kids that you're working with now come from Evanston and Evanston gangs or north side of Chicago or where?
It's a great question, Bev. So everything happens in the cafe. So at North, we have 2,400 square feet, and a good part of it is identified as office and social worker space. So that, one of the things that a lot of organizations do is you go in to have someone help you write a resume, and then they say, now go over here to get your ID, and it's like, how do I get there? I don't have a bus card, and I'm a teenager, and I'm going to find like 32 McDonald's and a couple houses before I go to place B. So everything that happens in the cafe. They get their GED tutoring at the cafe, like right at the counter, or they sit in a chair with the volunteer. They get their social services at the counter at the cafe. We'll drive them to get their ID and drive them back. When they get a job interview, we drive them to the interview and we drive them back. Everything happens there. Our classes happen either in the social worker's office if it's something that is not appropriate for the general public, but if it's like artwork, we'll put them in the cafe, put things down on the table so that they can do their artwork at the table, because we do think it's important for customers, community, to learn some of the stories, but not be in the kid's face. So they'll do that kind of work out in the cafe if it's appropriate. So everything happens there in order for us to make sure that the success happens. We take them on experiential trips once or twice a month. That's done by volunteers as well. And I think the president of FAM is actually taking them to the movie with like superheroes or something next week, but we take them to the Pilsen Mexican Fine Arts Museum, to the Baha'i Temple, to different places that they can go for free once they're out of our program. So we take them to an experiential trip and then for lunch and then somewhere else, so that they have this whole day that's outside of community, but that they're learning and they're welcomed back again.
Yeah, we've got time for about 2 or 3 more questions, just to let everybody know.
Repeat.
Just a quick question. I know that there's shelters for adults, there's shelters for women. Where can teenagers go? If they're homeless, how do you connect them with a place to stay if they don't have one?
There are no shelters for youth in our vicinity. And we do, you asked too where we get our kids, Skokie, Chicago, and Evanston. South side Chicago. We don't do a lot of Rogers Park for whatever reason. So shelters for women are fabulous. We got a girl out of a very abusive situation, and that was awesome. We sheltered her here, but it was a 30-day shelter. And there's no way an 18-year-old can assure herself a job and then get in the job after she's dealt with what she had dealt with, get a job. Subsidized housing takes 3 to 6 months. If you have a felony, you cannot even visit someone in subsidized housing, so they can't stay with a parent or a grandparent or whoever they know. Usually most of their friends and family are in subsidized housing, and most of our kids, boys anyways, carry felonies. So the girls, even if you shelter 30 days, what is that going to do? I had to pick her up from shelter and drive her to her aunt's house in Waukegan in a horrible neighborhood and leave her on her aunt's porch last November. That was not heated, nor was it locked. And that was the only place that we could find for her to stay. Boys, there's no shelters for young men. They won't stay in adult shelters because one guy confessed, he said it's like looking in the mirror, but it's also, they don't feel safe there. We do a great job sheltering adults, but it is different than youth. Youth are different. And it's expensive, and they're not going to come anyways, and blah, 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 blah. So we just don't shelter them. That's why the gangs do. Yeah.
Burnout is such a big problem for people working in nonprofits.
I'm learning that.
How do you keep yourself going? How do you combat burnout?
So getting the social workers was what my one reach. I didn't know that I could continue to hold those stories. I don't have that capacity. So that was one thing. Then it started when Benjamin was killed. I triggered again to where I wasn't sure, like, if I could do this. And then in November, I got an office space. It's like 400 square feet of nothing, but I love it. Because, again, I was getting too involved with kids, and it wasn't good for my personal health. So I go in enough to hear the stories and to give them hugs and to show them I love them, but I'm not able to carry the stories right now because I will get burnt out. It is really, really difficult. And burnout is one thing, and then you just sometimes just get pissed off. And, like, how can I get mad at people like you guys who are doing really good work, but you walk around being angry because no one sees what you see, and no one's like, I don't ever think people aren't working as hard as me, but I get mad. It's like people should know this stuff, and I get mad that I'm not the person that could really public speak out there and tell everybody, but you know, I do my best. I know my triggers now. The first couple of years I kind of was on a high, but yeah, I don't know how other people do it. I know a lot of people drink. It's not my go-to, but, you know.
We're going to have our last question right here.
No, we do have social workers who social work us. When Benjamin was killed, like 3 or 4 social workers came to us, 2 we knew, the rest we didn't know, and said, you guys are going to need help through this. And we were like, you know, when this happens, you don't know what's up, right? And we're like, yeah, we're cool, you know, we got each other. But they social worked us out of the trauma so that we could deal with us. So the community has really had our back on that. And they don't charge our staff.
I mean, you've described so many things you do. I'm just curious, how many $1,000s does it take to put one person through your program?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask, how much sleep do I get? So our program right now is $1 million is our budget. $500,000 is raised through Café sales. So we always tell the kids, this is not like welfare. I don't give you money. The community doesn't give you money. You work for every damn dollar you get in this place, which they don't, but we tell them that anyways, because what $500,000 or $1 million doesn't really make that much difference to them. So they have a great deal of respect for their job, and they try to get higher sales and stuff like that. So $500,000 is raised by the students alone. The other $500,000 we kind of beg, borrow, and steal for. But we've identified about $2,500 goes to each student as stipends. So they get a $50 stipend for an 8-hour day. And then the remainder of the money for the social workers and things like that brings the tally to about $8,000 per student. And we haven't figured out what it takes to mentor them continuously. Now we have a graduate program that we're just starting. But I would say way under $10,000 to incarcerate costs $70,000 a year. And they're usually incarcerated for 3 years. So we're clearly under that. But 10,000 is like a number I can reach to easily.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.